Welcome, Macon, to the Sapphic World Book Club.
Thanks so much for having me and for doing this. It really is very rad. It means a lot to me.
Well, we've been talking about the flight risk, and well, we all loved it because I think for me it's the best story of last year, maybe the best story I ever read. So
Well,
that's
thank
just to
you.
put your
Wow.
ego there.
Hey,
um,
never enough good things for my ego. It's very healthy. It needs constantly feeding.
okay, well, we'll do our best in the next 30 minutes. That's okay. So we've asked everyone to mute their mics, and they're gonna ask the questions to me, and to Jamie in the chat. So we're gonna
Okay,
be
great.
asking you the questions, because otherwise it will
Perfect.
be too
A little
big.
chaos.
A little chaos, yeah.
Just a
If you
little
read the
bit.
flight risk, I don't mind a little chaos.
That's true, but maybe for the YouTube people later,
Fair,
they'll be
fair
like,
enough. I
oh
guess we'll be considerate.
God. Why not? Why not? Jamie, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. So question number one is, of course, the ongoing for everyone. What was your inspiration for the story?
So the inspiration for the story is like fairly weird in that I really love the like any story where it's like, have y'all seen Once Upon a Time?
Mhm.
I love stories where like some random person, random kid, like the most random person you can imagine shows up and turns someone's life upside down. I just think that's like a really great story convention. And so the start of this story was really with the idea of what would it be like if you had this person who was totally unfettered in their mind, and then it turned out that they actually had been very fettered their whole life, and then the slow rolling understanding of that. Along with, I had a professor that was very obsessed with the red thread of fate. And so in the back of my mind, I was always like, I want to tell my red thread of fate story. Like, I want to tell my version of that. Um, and so those two things sort of came together and ended up in the flight risk.
Oh. And then on the heels of that, I've got D Rocks is saying, can Macon show us her murder board? We were saying we can't imagine all of what the
Mhm.
post-its or what your walls or whatever looks like for all the pieces of the timeline of the story.
I actually might, I can probably go back through my phone and find, so towards the end of the editing process, I was working with the person who did my sort of my last stage of edits before proofreading, Morgan Conwell. She's amazing. If you're looking for someone, Morgan rules. Um, but she had sent it back, and then I had taken all of the dates, and like I travel a lot for work, so I was in Asheville, North Carolina, and I had a huge window in my hotel room, so I literally just like pulled back the thing and had that entire window covered in post-its of like, okay, timeline one, timeline two, timeline three. Are we crossing right? Do we have all the dates right? And then I went back and checked, and then my very generous beta readers also noted, because towards the end I had the dates right, but the place wrong sometimes. So sometimes I would have like Nashville when we were really in Knoxville, just because it's complicated. And so, but I do probably somewhere have a murder board, but I didn't add the timeline, like the actual dated timeline, until several drafts in. For a lot of it, it was just the flashback, and then I was like, I'll timeline this eventually. And so that was something I knew I was eventually going to have to do, but like I couldn't let myself think about it too hard. Otherwise, my brain would have been exploding and I wouldn't have probably got it done.
How long did it
And
take you to write, like from the first word on the page to publish? How long did it take?
Oh, so I wrote bits and pieces of what ended up being parts of the flight risk for years, but from the time I got really serious about it to publication was probably 2.5 years.
Wow, that's a pretty decent time.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, but again, I had like pieces of this story that I had been telling for years, or versions of this story that I had been playing with, and then they all came together in this one. So also
Mhm.
I'm a slow writer. I talk to writers and they're like, yeah, I can write, like I'm out here banging out 4 or 5 books a year. And I'm like, okay, I might get 8 chapters done this year and everyone's welcome. Um, so that's also the fact is like I am just slow and really like research heavy and methodical.
So I know this should be a question for like the end of the Q&A, but does this mean that we have to like wait 3 years for another book?
No, I've been working on some stuff. So I'm hopefully gonna become a book a year person. So I think, at least every 18 months. But because I'm not writing like traditional romance novels and like that's just not what my brain lets me do. Like so many times I've tried to just write a straight up romance novel and then always halfway through I'm like, that's not what this is gonna be, is it? Um, so I just my brain won't let me write a straightforward story. It's always got to be a little bit complicated. And so I'm just slow and weird. And I've just decided to accept that about myself, that I'm slow and weird, and that's okay.
Well, it's very okay. If this is what you produce with that brain, very
Yeah.
good.
Thank you, thank you.
M. Schreiber had planned to be here and she wasn't able to make it today. So she texted me and she said, I really wanted to be there. I love the book so much. I'd really love to know how Macon kept track of all the different timelines.
Um, so kind of the great thing about writing a story like The Flight Risk is you are writing different timelines, but it was always memory. And so I didn't have a hard struggle keeping track of the timeline because I knew the points I was hitting in her life, right? So I wasn't really viewing it as interweaving stories in my head. It was just one story with these timeline flashbacks. And so because of that, it was fairly straightforward for me to keep like the story in my head. And then how I kept track of the timeline is I had so much help and then a giant whiteboard and just like fucking up a lot. And being like, the hardest part really was like, that this says 1983 and that says 1993 and this one says 2003. And eventually you're gonna have to choose which one's correct. Like there was a lot of like those pieces of it. But the book started out really different than how it ended up.
Mm.
And so, like in terms of like timeline, like it started out, well, the genesis of the novel was actually I was writing River's story and Bailey came into my head and then she just wouldn't go away.
Oh.
And like her story demanded to be told. So that's why I ended up telling The Flight Risk. But because of that, I had a really clear idea of who she was and who she was to Rivers very early.
So it wasn't, someone asks, it wasn't always written in Bailey's POV then.
Well, this book was always written in Bailey's POV, but Bailey wasn't originally from this story. This wasn't the first story I told with her in it. And in that story was written in like third person past. So, but from River's point of view. So the first writing of Bailey I did wasn't from Bailey's point of view. But as soon as I had the idea for this story, I knew immediately that you were going to have to be locked tight in Bailey's head for any piece of it to work and for the whole of it to work.
I have a question in the thing. Laura says, in some passages of the book, you reach poetic prose. If you had to choose your poetic inspirations, who would they be? Who are the poets that inspired you throughout all your life? That's a big
So
question.
that is a big question. And luckily, I have a great answer
Yay.
because I think about poetry all of the time. So my favorite poet of all time is Mary Oliver. It's not close. I'm obsessed with Mary Oliver.
Yay.
Yeah, so that's probably my favorite all-time poet. The other poets that I find really inspirational, Edna St. Vincent Millay is a big influence. Then man, how to narrow this down? I was really influenced by, I don't know if you guys have in the edits of The Flight Risk, I was reading a lot of Clint Smith's poetry. And then I was also reading a whole lot of let me get her name right. Um, Christina Sharp, just in general. She's more of a essay writer, but I think that she writes beautifully. And so those were influences. For sure. But I would say like my biggest poetic influences are Mary Oliver and Edna St. Vincent Millay, especially in the time when I was writing this. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Sorry. No, I'm
no,
good.
no. Your Liz wants to know, in the story, Bailey is pan and queer, but doesn't care too much about the labels, even though she didn't care much about it herself. Was it important for you to have her expression of pansexuality on the page?
Absolutely. I think that I never want to tokenize anybody's like sexuality or experience. So if I'm writing an identity, I want to write true to the identity, or as true to the identity as I can get. And so it was really important to me that you see that what Bailey is attracted to is the person, and that their sex, their gender just doesn't play a huge factor for her. And then I also, was really important to me that you see that a lot of Bailey's behaviors were escapist, and that includes sex for her. It's just a way not to be in her own head, or a way to be outside of herself. And so that was also really important to me in that. But yeah, I definitely wanted you to see her being pan, and not necessarily just saying that's my identity and then you never see her operate within that sexual context.
Jamie, you have another one?
Well, I was just going to follow up what we were talking about is the way that it started out with Rivers, and then Bailey came in and kind of took over. And in the book club portion, we were chatting about what we'd love to see and different perspectives. And one of them was, um, sorry, my chat's going at the same time. It's distracting. So sorry. So we were talking about how we'd love to see like Harper's backstory and River's backstory. So it's interesting that you said, oh, it started out as River's story, and then Bailey came in and said, oh, no, we're going to go
Yeah,
this way.
actually.
So I'm
Yeah.
wondering if that is to come. And then one of the questions too is, how is it for you writing in first person? Because you said you were in third person, and what that process was like.
So here's the thing that I did was I introduced Rivers to you as a 14-year-old precocious teenager that was hurting. And in her novel, she's very much not that. And so part of me, I don't know if I'm ever going to release that book or explore that book again, because Rivers isn't the most likable protagonist in the first quarter of that book, which is as far as I've gotten. And so I think that from the perspective of her being so damn likable as a kid, then going to her being, I think that would be a hard transition. So just like practically
Mm-hmm.
speaking, writing
Mm-hmm.
and experiencing it, I'm not 100% sure but I would love to eventually get brave enough to tell that story for sure. In terms of from Harper's point of view, that's really interesting. I've never considered writing writing Harper's backstory, or writing, because for me this was always so much Bailey's story.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's a really interesting notion. Maybe I could do a writing exercise and see what that would look like with one of the chapters, or one of the experiences of them together. But yeah, I've never done that. I will give you guys a little sneak insight, which is the novel I'm working on now is Ada is the story, part of the story. So it's Ada Best story, or she's one of the protagonists in it.
Mm-hmm.
If you do that
Cool.
writing exercise, please email it to us.
Okay, deal.
Yes, definitely.
Nice.
Deal. And in terms of first person writing, I am one of those like very annoying writery people who are like, you just tell the story in the point of view that the story makes sense in. And so like I don't have any sacred beliefs or anything around like what point of view is best. I think it's the point of view that works best for the story you're telling. And I think that a lot of times writers get themselves into trouble just as like a lover of books. I'm like, oh, you wanted to tell this in a different person, but you were worried people wouldn't follow you or whatever. And so I think you get yourself into trouble if you lock yourself into any one point of view, or because like from if you think about like novels that I love, the outside of like Sapphic fiction, like The Great Gatsby's told in second person. That's wild to think. Like that's wild. Or Huckleberry Finn also told in first person, but kind of second person. And so there's so much you can do with with words and with language. I would hate to be like, I only am going to write in this. And so for me, it was like an easy transition. As soon as I understood what I was trying to do with the story, I was like, well, this is going to be first person present, and that's what we're going to do. So I better learn how to do that real fast.
Someone asks, who was the woman at the beginning of the book? She played such a huge part to set the scene of the story. Will we ever see her again? So many questions.
So I don't think it necessarily matters, like for the story. Like Authorial Intent, I am not like an Authorial Intent is the end all be all. I think books are gifts writers give their readers, and then what you make of it is what you make of it. So I don't have like I don't want to say like my word is law, like I'm not like that, but I will say that in my head when I was writing it, that was Bailey's mom. And it was like the first moment of fate, because I really thought it was important that in this moment where Bailey thinks that she's throwing it all away, she's literally chaining herself to her fate, right? Like she literally puts a chain on with the ring and saying like, this is my fate, even as she thinks she's letting it go. And I felt like it was really important to have the person giving her that wisdom, for me, be someone that could only be fated. Only fate could have those two people in that place so far from home cross paths. And so I wanted it from the very beginning to be like pretty clear. And if you go back and read, there's like little hints where you could see like maybe this could be Bailey's mom with like the way she's described, the way she stands, that sort of thing. But ultimately for me, it was it was very important that the stories start with fate because it ends with fate.
Yeah, because you have the epilogue, the prologue, and it's the same place, such different emotions. Tell us more about that.
Well, actually, so it's really interesting because I didn't have the epilogue or the prologue until very late in the game. Beta readers had the book before I had either. Or maybe I think so. I can't remember, but time is a flat circle. But it was those are both the last two pieces I wrote. And I wrote the epilogue because Morgan was like, hey, Bailey's a writer and we never see her write. Don't you think that's weird? Like we never see any of her writing. And I was like, I mean, not really. And she was like, do you think you could work it into the story? And I was like, I don't, just because for the simple fact of if you come out of Bailey's head at all, I think the story loses its power. I think the story works because you're so locked into Bailey from start to finish that like zooming out and then going back in, I think would have been very abrupt, especially since so much of the story is you feeling what Bailey's feeling, you feeling the uncoiling. And so I was like, well, maybe I can do something at the end. And that's when I got the idea I was literally at the gym and I still have the note on my phone where I got the first sentence of that prologue. And then I just stopped my workout and went home and wrote it. And then once I had read that, I had always had in my mind how Bailey got the ring, but it wasn't anywhere in the story. It was just something I had kind of one-off written, set aside just so that I knew where the chain came from and how that happened. And then I was like, oh, it would be really good if I open it with that and then we end where we end, and then it's like it ties it together. So that's sort of how those two pieces came together. And also I did my final read through of the story and I was like, man, something's missing. Like it's like right there, but it's not there. And I don't think it has to do with how it's written anymore. Like I think it's missing something. So kind of all of those came together on those pieces. But I do think that they make the story so much better.
Yeah, it's circle. It's like
yeah,
so good.
Love a callback.
Yeah. Yeah. Liz says when Macon told me that it wrecked me. Well, I'll be wrecked in like half an hour. Gonna be good. Let's see. I have one says Macon has mentioned that she doesn't see what she's writing in her head, that it comes from vibes. Can she explain a little more about that? Because her writing to me is very visual.
Thank you for that. I try really hard. So I have one of those brains where you don't see pictures. And I have a very a very intense, like I don't like it's all nothing. Like I I cannot get anywhere directionally except for places I go over and over again. And everyone's like, oh, that's literally, I have to be to a place 50 times before my brain's like, and we can get there now. And so I just don't see anything. And so when I say it's vibe based, it's like, I don't know how to explain it except say, like, I know what an apple is. I know what different kinds of apples are. I know what different kinds of apples look like. I can tell you what they look like. I just can't see it in my own brain. And I think that's part of why story is so, why I love story so much is how evocative really good writing is. And it makes you feel and see and understand in ways maybe we don't otherwise. And I think that's part of the power of story. And so when I say it's vibe based, it's basically like I know the feeling I'm trying to evoke. I know the emotion I'm trying to evoke when I'm trying to tell you the story. And so I'm writing based on like vibes. But I think that for that kind of writing to work, it has to be immersive. And for something to be immersive, I want you to feel like you're there. And so I'm always trying to walk the line of giving you enough visual that you can see it and enough things that you can feel it, but I'm never taking the fun part of creating the world that is yours away from you, right? So I'm always just trying to like ride that line of here's enough information, but not too much. Here's how it feels, but not too much. And then the other part of that is I think that the flight risk is a lot of things, but at the core of it, it's a character study. And so it was really important to me that you felt and saw and experienced what Bailey was experiencing. And in order to do that, I felt like I had to be very descriptive in certain points. Or in other points, not descriptive enough, where it was like clearly Bailey was disassociating from the situation.
So, you have a background in psychology.
I do. I'm a recreational therapist, so some psychologists would be upset with me if I didn't. Recreational therapist.
Okay, well, still,
Yeah.
did you take that knowledge into the character building?
I mean, I don't think I can ever divorce myself from that knowledge, right? Like it's all up there. Um, so I'm not, I don't, I'm going to use Haley Cass as an example. Haley like knows these people inside and out from like before she puts a word on the page. She can be like, and then on her second birthday, she was given this teddy bear and it changed her life. And I'm like, she exists and this is her vibe, and we're gonna write till we figure out the rest of it. And so in that sense, I do think the psychology is always part of it. And once I have a clear understanding of who the character is, I will go back and make their behavior more consistent to the type of person they are. And part of the rewrite. So like Bailey has a very avoidant attachment style, for example. And so when I went back on my third or fourth rewrite, I made sure to put in some behaviors and some things that would clue you into the idea of an avoidant attachment style. And so so I do things like that at the end, but like when I'm first writing, I'm a discovery writer. I'm out here. I have a general idea of where the story's going and who these people are, and then we'll figure it out as we go.
Can you give an example of that? What
Sure.
parts you put in?
Yeah. So, yeah, great example. So when Bailey is first calls Harper and they're in the parking lot and Harper's gonna come. And Bailey has that moment of like, I'm a traitor. But right before that moment of I'm a traitor, she writes, there's all these anxious things that she's feeling. What she's feeling is an avoidant response. And what she's gonna do is bail. But then she has to justify it to herself, so she quickly moves on to Rivers being the reason. But at the core of it, it was always she wasn't ready to deal with this. She needed to get away. And so she gave herself an excuse to get away. In the first version of that story, they had a Rivers and I mean Harper and Bailey talked to each other in that moment, and then Bailey bailed. But I thought it was stronger if you saw her not being ready to deal with it and then leave, and then it's a bigger conflict later.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's...
So do you, in with all of that, yeah, that was a lot. Landing. Okay. So it sounds like you consider yourself more of a pantser than a planner when it comes to your writing.
Oh yeah, I'm a pantser when it comes to my life. I pantser, full pantser. Yeah, I usually have, like, when I start a story, I usually have a theme, something I want to write about, and a general idea of who the characters are and what I want to happen. Like, and then it's all figuring it out as I go.
I have a question here. The beginning of the story is kind of jumbled like Bailey's mind. Is that a writing style you chose on purpose for that part of the story?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I wanted you to feel hungover. I wanted you to feel that you're waking up. You have no idea where you're at. You have no idea what's going on. All you know is things are bad and you're about to vomit. Like, I wanted you to feel that. It was really important to me, that you're as discombobulated as she is when she runs into Rivers. Like, I needed it to be, you are off kilter, and then you have this like life-changing moment that you're so out of sorts, you don't have time to think rationally about. Because if Bailey's thinking rationally in that moment, she does none of what she actually does, right? Because she's a grown woman with smart. And so what she's going to do is she's going to be like, we're going to call your person and we're just going to wait till your person gets here. But because she's so off kilter, she's not thinking rationally. She's just hungover and miserable and wants it to be over, that she lets herself be carried along for a little bit before rationality hits. And I think that if you're not with her when then the whole time you're questioning, why is she doing this? This is so weird. But because I feel like, because I tried to get you in her shoes, it makes perfect sense what she's doing, because she's just trying to leave this mistake behind. There's this weird thing happening and she just needs to survive it because, wow, do I want a cup of coffee, or why do I want a Diet Coke or whatever? So
you definitely achieved that, because my mind was like in total chaos. I was like, what's happening right now? So,
yeah. And I know it's a
done.
hard, like, from the very beginning, I was like, this is a really hard place to start a story. Like, I know I'm breaking so many conventions by having this be how I start a story. But again, I also felt like people need to know what this is going to be and that it's going to be weird. And this is a really good way to not censoring myself there was a really good way to prepare you for the rest of the book, essentially.
Awesome. I have a question from Jade. Which part of which characters do you think are the most like you, and why Peaches?
So why Peaches is a great question that no one's ever asked me before. And the truth of why Peaches is a couple of things. One, I think there is in my head, a distinctly Southern fruit. Like, it's you think the South, like, one of the things you think is like Georgia peaches, the South peaches. And so I just wanted it to be something that was just, like apple can be kind of universal. I wanted it to feel of a place. So that's the first. And then the second is, there's something about peaches that are a little bit sexy to me without being like strawberry, like an overtly sexy fruit. And I wanted that moment to be uniquely Southern and kind of sexy and kind of weird and very complicated. And so I felt like the peach was a good choice. Also, like, peaches were in season at the time that the story was written, like that's peach season. And I just think that the idea of a bunch of peaches rolling all over your car is very funny. I just think it would have been funny with anything, but for something about peaches to me was just particularly funny. I will give you guys a fun little antidote, which is, I originally had it as like a pound of peaches because I have like lived alone since I was in my early 20s. Like, I buy like 4 of things. I'm not buying by weight. I'm buying by, this is the number I'll eat this week. And so in the original thing, it was like a pound of peaches. It's like, that's so many peaches. And then Liz, who beta read for me, was like, hey dude, a pound of peaches is like 3 peaches. It's not very many peaches. You're going to need dramatically more peaches. And I was like, I'm going to need so many more peaches. And so, That's an example of a beta reader saving my life. But yeah, but and I also, there's a lot of great poetry that involves like peaches, and a lot of great Southern poets use it as a fruit in their like poems about longing. And so I thought that that was really cool to like tie all of that up.
But it's also
I
like the
love.
rogue peach is like the
Yeah.
whole sentence is so cool. I mean,
Hmm.
the rogue kiwi would be like,
Yeah.
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 like,
Yeah.
you know, it just
Well,
works.
It
for
totally
sure.
works.
Yeah, and the idea of the rogue peach kind of I I go through word phases where I really like a word and I'll apply it to anything. And when I was writing this story, I had like gotten groceries and dropped a bunch of fruit, and the it went everywhere, and then I got it all. I was like, "Oh, look, there's a rogue peach." And like those two words together just sounded fun to me, and I was like, "Oh, that's what I'm going to use. I want to use that term."
That's
I
fantastic.
love that.
That's cool.
I've got one more follow-up from Jade is what is your favorite character,
Oh, great
if you
question.
have one? Yeah.
So I think it's hard not to answer Bailey because I was so in her head, and she's such a, like, at her core, the thing about Bailey is she's not an asshole, but she thinks she is, and I really like that in a person. Like she's so convinced she's an asshole, but she's really not.
Yeah.
And so I really like that. But like my favorite character to write in when writing the Road Peach was Rivers. I just liked her whole arc. I liked the idea of her, like she introduces herself as a rogue peach, and then she's acting like a rogue, like the caricature of a rogue the whole time. And I thought that it was really funny to have this character that literally announces who they are from the way she introduces herself. And you don't catch on to it until like the last fourth of the novel when it comes to light all of the trickery and stuff. So
Mhm.
she was very fun to write. And writing her skirting the truth, like telling enough of the truth, but not so much to give herself away, was really fun.
Mhm. Cool.
I'm mindful for the time because we're almost out of it. Are you okay with a few more questions?
Yeah, I'm it's Saturday, I'm chilling.
Good. Well, if anyone is here and has other appointments, don't be afraid, just leave. Thank you for coming. And the whole Q&A will be on YouTube, so you won't have to miss a thing. Okay. Um,
I have one more from, I have a
yeah,
question.
I've got
Or do
like
you have one,
loads of
Caroline?
them. Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna,
Can I do one?
yes.
Okay. So Nashville is like an
Mhm.
extra character in the book, has a huge influence on Bailey. Why did why did you think that place in general was so important?
Well, I think that, and I don't know that necessarily it's a uniquely Southern trait, but I will say it's a particularly Southern trait, in that place matters a lot in the South.
Why?
And I, I culture, there's a lot of pride in being a Southerner. I think there's a lot of, I saw on Twitter like a couple of days ago a map of someone from Canada and like how they think about the South, and or how they think about the United States, and it was like no idea, what is this, Hollywood, New York, and then the entire South was just a circle and it said bigots. And I think there is a something about the South that it's just like we get shit on a lot. And when you get shit on a lot, it makes you defensive of the place that you're from and the thing that you're from. So I think just as a culture, we're like, hey, you don't know us. We're great. Like sense to it. And so place has just always been really important to me. I also think that for a story about someone who's so determined, for someone who's thinking about home, and for us, home is almost always associated with place. I needed her home, her place to have a very strong character and for it to be both good and bad. And so that's why I think place matters, because you have to have that. You have to have what they're running away from and what they're running away to for a story about running to make sense. And so place was really important. And if you'll notice, none of the other places Rivers or Bailey goes to have as strong a sense of place. Nashville is very clear. Knoxville's kind of clear, but it's really just the people that make Knoxville. It's not the place of Knoxville. And that was important to me too, because Bailey's not running to anything. She's running away from something.
Yeah, but her home is Harper, not Nashville.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But in Bailey's brain, I think Nashville and Harper are the same thing. Until they're not. Yeah.
Very last.
Mm-hmm.
Jude says The Flight Risk is a debut novel, but when Macon talks about it or the art of writing, she sounds like an experienced pro. Has she written a lot before publishing, or does it come from her knowledge of literature, or both?
I've written a lot. I've been writing since I was little. So I think that piece of it is probably just like it's something. It's like it's not ever something I'm conscious of choosing to do. It's something I feel like I've always done. But I do think that I love books and I love story and I love it all so much that I've become somewhat of an accidental student of it. And so I do read a lot about it. I do read a lot of books. I do think deeply about what I read for sure. But I think that a lot of it comes from just being like such a passionate fan that like I'm a person with ADHD and you have like your hyperfixations, and the only hyperfixation I've ever not lost is books and story and literature.
Oh, those ADHD minds.
I get you.
Lovely.
Very busy.
We have them a lot. D-Rox wants to know, has your podcast with Liz given you any new ideas for stories since you get to talk with so many other authors?
Oh, great question. I don't necessarily know that it's given me new ideas for stories, but it has made me a better writer, just listening to all these great minds talk about writing, but also even when we do podcasts with non-writers that are artists, it's so inspiring to listen to them talk about their process. And the thing that I've learned about art is it's all storytelling. Art is always about story. And so whether it's you're writing a story and that's your specific, or you're painting a painting to tell a story, or you're singing a song that is a story, it's all story. And that has been the part of it that has been like the most impactful to the way that I think about the world and the way that I write and the way that I approach art is it's all story. But it has been really damn rad to get to spend hours talking to great writers and great artists and I think it's season 2, we're leveling up and it's going to be even cooler. So I'm just been like, it's such a gift.
People are now going podcast. What? Where?
Yeah.
Where?
Oh, so
famous.
Yeah, let me give you guys a pitch. Liz Gray and I host a podcast called Strictly Sapphic. You can find it wherever you find podcasts. And it's essentially a podcast about creating Sapphic art, why we create Sapphic art, and why it matters. And it's also a little bit horny.
And if you haven't listened yet, do so, because it's awesome.
It's good.
Love it.
Yeah, we go, they're long episodes, I will say. And we keep being like, this one's going to be an hour. And then like, no, it's not. Like, it's not going to be an hour. They're long. And so I'm on. Liz is our editor. She's brilliant. She's such a brilliant editor. And she's always like, we have to make these shorter. No one's ever going to listen. And I'm like, I'm trying so hard, but what am I going to do? Tell Carrie Bird I don't want to talk about that? Because I do. I do want to talk about that, Carrie Bird.
Or you can just edit it out, but then
then you guys don't get to hear it. And I think you guys can all agree that getting to hear it is awesome.
Yeah, please don't make them shorter.
We do want to hear it. Yes, no need to make them shorter.
Please don't make them shorter.
Are you hearing that? Are you hearing that?
You hear
Liz, can you unmute and verbally acknowledge that you heard that?
I hear it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I know in the past you've talked about if you were looking to do an audiobook, you would have to find the perfect narrator that had the correct Tennessee accent. Is that in the works at all, or?
I don't know anything about this business outside of like the storytelling part. So I don't even know how I would go about getting an audiobook made. And Every now and then I try to convince Liz to quit her job and become an audiobook engineer. And that's as far as I've gotten. But I do think hopefully one day I'll be able to make it into an audiobook. I think that it would read well as an audio, as long as someone had the tone right, which I think would be fairly easy to capture.
Ooh. And Laura wants to know, is there a Sapphic book you wish you had written?
Oh, great question. A Sapphic book I wish I had written. Oh man. Oh wow. There's so many. Hmm. You know, I'm gonna give you three because I can't give you one. I think In the Long Run is such a good book. Haley Cass is In the Long Run. So that's one that I would love to have my hand in and give my spin on. I really I admire JJ Arias so much. And like a Destination U, or being able to like have whatever talent it is that, and like my spin on a Destination U, I think that would be one. And then this isn't a romance novel, but it is a Sapphic novel. I Keep My Exoskeletons to Myself is a real, it's super cool. It's super cool with what it's like, a very experimental novel. It's very rad, and I would love to do a spin on that. Like I would love to have my version of that. So those would probably be the three that if I could make them mine, that I would want to make them mine. And then I always think about like the reverse of this. If I could have a Sapphic artist who would take their stab at the flight risk. And I've thought about this a lot, just like in myself. And I think Claire Ashton's version of the flight risk would fuck hard. I think it would be so good.
Ooh, that's interesting. Oh, I hope she will watch this and go, "Yes." I would read that. And maybe you could do one of hers.
You know, here's the thing, man. I'm not an Anglophile. How the work I'd have to do to get that Britishness correct? Nah, I'm good.
Oh, you can
We won the war a long time ago. I don't have to. Yeah, I'll make the American version. I'm good.
Yeah, do a Southern version, and she can do like
Poppy Jenkins.
Poppy Jenkins
Just
in
Poppy
Nashville.
Jean. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Poppy Jean. That
I'll
is
read
so
it.
Southern.
I'll read it, definitely. One last question, two questions.
Okay. Yeah. As many as you guys want. I'm not going anywhere. I love talking about my book, and I don't get to do it very often. So this is a privilege for me.
We can just go, and you can just you can just keep talking. That's okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Do you have one more, Jamie?
Actually, that's a really good question. What do you want us to know?
Ooh.
Tell us what you want us to know.
Interesting. That's an interesting question. What would be the question I'd want someone to ask me? Okay, here's an interesting thing. The original version of the Naked Man story is something that happened, like that is a college experience I had. Just like with the dial turned up to 11. And no one's ever asked, and I just want you to know, most of the stories did not happen to me. But I was walking into in grad school, it was an undergrad. So walking into my apartment, and my door and my next door neighbor's door were right there. And as I went it was like 2 a.m, I was coming back from the library because I'm a nerd, and it was grad school. And as I'm opening my door, this naked man is thrown out of the door, and the door slams and locks behind him. And so then I'm standing on this porch with this like 21 maybe year old naked kid, and then like my 24-year-old self. And we were just like looking at each other. And then I did like eventually invite him into my home, and he did sit down on my couch, and it was unsanctioned couch nudity. And I did have to remind him continuously to keep the towel on. So I just like, of the stories that happened, almost all of them are like completely fabricated, but that did happen. And I was like, one day I'm going to put this in a story. And then I was like, oh my gosh, that's the perfect way to introduce Noah. Like the perfect way to have these two like friend, soulmate, platonic loves find each other is through like such a thing where it's like he's so low status in that moment and she's still so bad for him. And because of that like moment of pity, she's able to let him in a way she's not letting other people in. I think it's just like it was like really fun to get to use that story that I promised myself I would always use.
And are you still in contact with this naked man?
No, I actually never learned his name. I just let him use my cell phone
The
and his
naked-
girlfriend came and got him. I just thought it
Did
was
you
like
call him the naked man? Did you say
when I told the
did you call-
story, I called him the naked man. In the moment, I was like, dude. It was just dude. And I cannot stress to you enough how incoherently drunk he was at the time, though. So it was like,
Did he wear flip-flops?
no, that is just a personal preference.
That's awesome.
That is another thing that is true of me. That is how I feel about flip-flops. They are a trash shoe.
It's just awesome.
Um,
Okay. Cool.
I will defy. That is a hill I will die on.
And like flip-flops.
It is unsafe. Strap your shoe to your foot. What are you guys doing? Just out here wearing flip-flops? Trip risk,
Flip-flopping.
fall risk.
Flip-flopping. Okay. Let's see. One last question. Do you have one?
Safety first, then friendship.
What?
Safety first, then friendship.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
You have
But
flip-flops
and you're
with
in
the
the
extra bands.
South. I mean, the South. I mean, is I don't know. I'm thinking there's
Tennessee
lots of
is a
flip-flop.
landlocked state. We are a landlocked state. Do you know how
That's
many
only for
bars
beaches.
I've walked into and seen grown men in flip-flops in a
Yes.
landlocked state? What are you doing? Put on shoes. The closest beach is hundreds of miles away.
You
I
don't
was
have
gonna say
lakes.
the time. Well, the
We
time
do
I
have
spent in
lakes,
the
but
South, they definitely
wear
are flip-flops. Lots of flip-flops in the
so many
South.
flip-flops. I don't get it, man. Also, our lakes are like out, like wear a Chaco. Strap that
Yeah,
shoe to
you gotta hike
unsafe.
to those lakes.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Even the ones that's like you got a house on it, you still have a hike down to get to it.
Right.
We got lots of rocks. Our ground is mostly rocks.
It's a different kind of
Acres.
strap-on. Strap-on.
What I'm
Let's see.
saying. I'm pro all strap-ons. I want to go on record, Sapphic World Book Club as pro strap-on.
Love
I
it.
think that's the
awesome.
perfect end to this. It is. Where can we find you if you want to?
I am on Twitter sometimes. I'm on Instagram sometimes. I do a newsletter through Substack called Macon Books, and I'm there often. Strictly Sapphic podcast, you can find me. Pretty easy to find. All of those places, it's one Macon Books or one Macon Leigh.
Well, that's easy.
So
I
yeah.
wanted to thank you very much for
Thanks, y'all.
giving us our time and
Yeah.
information and fun. And we are very, very, very looking forward to your next project.
Perfect. I'll try to get going.
Yes, go.
Harper.
Go. Go
I
now.
might do that. I might release a special edition something from Harper's point of view. Just now that you brought that up, as a little
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
a little
see
treat.
hearts. I see a lot of hearts. Oh, cool.
What scene would you want? If you could do one scene, what scene would you want?
Oh, geez.
Oh boy.
I think the one when she the one when Bailey says she's pregnant.
Okay, that's a good one.
I think that one. And then maybe the whole story. Just start there and then,
And then-
tell it all.
wow.
I think
Wow.
it might evolve into a book. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm getting all of them.
Yeah.
All of them.
All of them.
All right, I'll see what I can do.
Keep us posted.
Will do.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, y'all. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate you guys for having me. Sapphic World Book Club. This has been incredible. It's as a debut author, and I don't have a huge following, and so to be chosen for something like this is exceptionally special to me. So thank you guys so much.